I'm going to be going over and ranking phase 1 of the MCU, including all the films and short films, starting with the 2008 Iron Man. Tony Stark is on a tour in Afghanistan when suddenly his convoy gets attacked. Tony is severely injured by a missile and is held hostage by a group of terrorists. We get a flashback to an award show where we learn Tony's backstory, and we see his business partner Obadiah Stone accepting an award for Tony as Tony is off gambling at a casino. Tony raw dogs a reporter, she gets kicked out by Pepper Potts, and then Tony starts flirting with Pepper. Tony, Happy, and Rhodey get on the plane to Afghanistan for a weapons presentation. Tony demonstrates the Jericho missile, and then we fast forward to the present again, where it's shown that Tony has shrapnel stuck in his chest and has an electromagnet attached to him to prevent it from reaching his heart. The terrorist leader tells Tony to build the Jericho missile for him. He says no, and Tony gets waterboarded. It's revealed that the terrorists have a stockpile of Stark weapons, and the leader asks Tony to build the missile in exchange for his freedom. Tony begrudgingly accepts, but knows that he's a dead man either way. Tony gets to work, but he instead builds an arc reactor, and with the help of Yinsen, they plan to build a suit of armor and escape. Unbeknownst to Tony and Yinsen, the terrorists have them under heavy surveillance, and they find that something's up. Tony saves Yinsen, they quickly build the suit, and the terrorists are alerted. Knowing that they need more time, Yinsen saves Tony, and arguably saves the entire universe. But let's stick to phase 1 for now. Tony starts beating the brakes off the terrorists, as he is now protected with the Mark I armor. Tony sees Yinsen die and promises him not to waste his life. He escapes the cave and completely violates the Geneva Convention, turns the whole village into a barbecue. Tony starts getting hit and then decides to bail, blows up the cave, and crash lands into a nearby desert. Tony's rescued by Rhodey and his men and is transported back to the US. Tony tells his team that he wants a press conference and a cheeseburger. He gets both, and he announces that he's shutting down the weapons division of Stark Industries after seeing his weapon kill US soldiers, which causes a huge commotion among the media. We also meet Phil Coulson, who works for S.H.I.E.L.D. Obadiah warns Tony that this move would destroy the company financially, and it does, but Tony is adamant on moving forward with technology. Tony builds a new arc reactor and begins building his Mark II armor. He has some setbacks, but eventually succeeds. We see the new suit, and my god, does it look sick. Tony takes flight, his suit freezes, but he comes back safe. The terrorists find the Mark I armor. Tony starts cutting up. This is so fucking stupid. Tony starts cutting up in the R8. We get a Stan Lee cameo. Tony starts rizzing up Pepper, and it's revealed that Obadiah is making deals with the terrorist organization known as the 10 Rings, as well as trying to kick Tony out of his company. Tony uses the new Mark III armor and goes to save a village that's under attack by the 10 Rings. Tony defeats the bad guy from earlier and destroys everything standing in his way. Tony gets chased by the Air Force, but saves the lives of one of the pilots. The 10 Rings tries to make a deal with Obadiah for the Mark I armor, but Obadiah kills them and takes the armor. Pepper and Tony learn that Obadiah has planned the attack on Tony in Afghanistan, and we learn that his team is having difficulty replicating the suit. Obadiah paralyzes Tony and steals the arc reactor. Thankfully, Pepper saved the old arc reactor, and it's used to save Tony's life. Pepper and the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents try to get to Obadiah, but it's too late. We see that the Mark I armor is still there, as Obadiah used it as a base to construct the Ironmonger suit. Tony and Obadiah fight, but Tony is outmatched, as he has to work with a much weaker arc reactor. However, Tony's upgrades are much stronger, which gives him the edge. Tony uses his experience from earlier and freezes the Ironmonger suit. Tony uses the arc reactor in the lab and defeats Obadiah. He then reveals to the world that he's Iron Man, and then we get a post-credit scene where Nick Fury tells him about the Avengers initiative. The end. This film was just amazing from start to finish. We had insane visuals that were ahead of its time, very good pacing and narration, and the characters were just so memorable. I think this film had the perfect balance of comedy and action. I genuinely found myself laughing so hard to some of RDJ's witty responses. The casting from this film was amazing. Like, RDJ was just born to play this role, and I love how he has a really solid character arc in this film, as he goes from this obnoxious guy who's somewhat of a liability liability to his friends, and then he has the life-changing 3 months in the cave, and then we get someone who is dedicated to working on this one single project. And then by the end of the film, Tony has embraced his responsibility by telling the world that he's Iron Man. You can also see that Tony is much more fearless past the first act of the film, and he takes a lot of risks later on, such as flying at high altitude and using the arc reactor in the end. And it just adds more layers to the character development that we see in this film. I feel like RDJ worked so well as Tony because RDJ doesn't even have to play a character. Tony's character is essentially RDJ's real life arc, as it's a story about redemption and second chances both on and off screen. I thought the rest of the casting was phenomenal, such as Jeff Bridges, Gwyneth Paltrow, and Terrence Howard. I think the other cool thing that they did in this film, which was very subtle, was they broke up the acts by each Iron Man armor, and the armor also changes based on what Tony goes through outside of the suit. Act 1 has the Mark 1 that resembles Tony's desperation and vulnerability, as he's cut off from the protected and sort of coddled environment that we see in his flashbacks. Tony's definitely out of his comfort zone, so he builds a very bulky, stiff armor that's more so built to shield him and help him escape. We have Act 2, where Tony is now back to his former life, but he's not the same person. Similar to Mark 2, where there's now more funding and resources, but there's still a different function and purpose, and it looks completely different and refined. Act 3, we see Tony learning from his mistakes, as well as merging both himself and Iron Man to the same identity, similar to the Mark III suit, now donning the red and gold to give it some of Tony's flamboyant personality, and being the most refined suit that we see. The action scenes were awesome, the film did a great job with refining the origin with some modern elements, and the end credit scene was a cherry on top when it comes to establishing the groundwork for the MCU, as for the first time in history, we would see characters collab and interact in a franchise like never before. This one's an easy S tier. There was nothing there to really criticize from this film. It aged so well, and it literally started the most successful film franchise in history. We move on to the second entry in the MCU, which was The Incredible Hulk. We start with some flashbacks in the opening credits of Bruce turning into the Hulk. Fast forward to the present, and Bruce Banner is living in the favelas of Brazil and working as an engineer at a factory. We can see him being very cautious about his pulse and trying to learn how to stay calm. Bruce cuts himself and stops the factory, but his blood gets in contact with one of the bottles. Bruce receives a package from someone named Mr. Blue, which seems like a cure for his condition. However, this fails, and Bruce hesitantly resorts to sending a blood sample to Mr. Blue. The bottle from earlier gives gamma poisoning to none other than Stan Lee, which leads to the military discovering Bruce's location. General Thaddeus Ross hires Emil Blonsky to capture Bruce. A chase ensues, and Bruce turns into the Hulk and outright destroys the Special Forces team. Ross tells Emil how Bruce was transformed and convinces him to take the serum as well. Bruce starts to make his way back home and arrives at Culver University in Virginia, where he goes to see Dr. Elizabeth Ross, where he learns that she has a new boyfriend. Betty finds Bruce and takes him home, gives him the data needed for the cure, and the general injects Emil with the super serum. The military finds Bruce and he turns into the Hulk. Hulk starts destroying everything, gets hit with some sonic cannons, and then destroys everything again. He also punts the shit out of Emil, seemingly killing him. Bruce and Betty escape. Emil's a veggie. Bruce almost transforms into the Hulk mid-pipe, and then Emil is seen to recover from his injuries due to the serum. Bruce and Betty go to New York to find Samuel Stearns, aka Mr. Blue, who believes that he's created an antidote for Bruce's condition. Bruce is seemingly cured, and Stearns reveals that he used the cure on test subjects prior to Bruce, but none of them survived. Bruce gets tranquilized and captured. Emil forces Stearns to inject him with the same stuff as Bruce, and Emil is turned into the Abomination, while Stearns also gets in contact with Bruce's DNA. The Abomination starts destroying the city of Harlem, and Bruce convinces Ross to let him fight. Ross agrees. Bruce jumps out and fails to transform, and he dies. The end. Nah, but imagine if Bruce failed to Hulk up. That would have been the funniest ending ever. But anyways, he turns green, and then we get Hulk versus Abomination. Abomination starts throwing Hulk around. Hulk turns into Hercules from God of War 3, equips a police car as gauntlets, and then just starts spazzing on Abomination with combos. Ross helps Hulk, and we see the two fighting while holding onto the helicopter. They crash, and then they continue the fade. Hulk saves Betty and Ross. Abomination hits Hulk with this big ass chain, and then Hulk uses the chain to choke Abomination and defeats him. Bruce escapes to British Columbia, where he now learns to embrace the Hulk. We see General Ross at a bar, and we meet Tony Stark, where he tells Ross about the idea of putting a team together. Now, Iron Man was the film that brought hype to Marvel Studios and the MCU, but Hulk was one that almost derailed all hype. This film was not good, and you can tell within 30 minutes of watching this film. First off, I hated how messy and shaky everything was. It just makes your eyes sore watching all these scenes, as well as the dull, depressing color grading that just makes everything feel like a low-budget film. The acting was cheesy at times, and the story was just too simple and boring for my liking. The first act in Brazil was kind of cool, but the scenes in the university all the way to the end battle, it was just such a drag, and I'm thinking like, alright, let's hurry it up now. I will say the final battle between Hulk and Abomination was sick. It kind of started winning me over at the end of the film, but then it just ends and you feel like you just got 90% filler to get to this one cool scene. I'm gonna give this one a D. I really enjoyed the final fight scene, but having to sit through the first hour and a half to get there, the payoff just wasn't worth it. We now get to Iron Man 2. We start the film in Moscow, Russia, where we meet Ivan Vanko and his dying father, Anton. Before passing away, Anton leaves Ivan a blueprint of an arc reactor similar to Tony's in the first film. Fast forward 6 months and we see Tony straight up aura farming with his entrance at the Stark Expo. Like, who does bro think he is? He gives a speech about fulfilling his father's legacy, and then we see Tony has a health problem as his blood toxicity levels are slowly rising. Tony gets called to the Senate where they demand that he hand over the Iron Man suit to the military, but he refuses. We meet Tony's business rival Justin Hammer, who is also testifying against him. Stark embarrasses Hammer and states that his tech is superior and has privatized world peace. We see that Tony's use of the arc reactor is slowly killing him, and there is no viable cure for the rising blood toxicity. Tony hides his condition from Pepper, and he also makes her the CEO of Stark Industries. We get introduced to Natalie Rushman, who becomes Pepper's new assistant after she takes Happy down with ease. Jon Favreau definitely knew what he was doing when he wrote this part into the film, and I mean, I don't blame him. Tony goes to Monaco, he meets Elon Musk, Justin Hammer, and the reporter that he piped in the first film. Tony knows that he's dying, and he does a little thrill-seeking side quest by racing in the Monaco Grand Prix. Ivan walks onto the tracks, and he starts slicing up the cars. Very uncool of you, Ivan. Tony survives this Lightning McQueen-ass crash, and then Happy runs Ivan over. We get one of the coolest suit-ups in the history of suit-ups. This shit was so fucking cool, but yeah. Tony and Whiplash fight, and Tony defeats him. Later on, Tony learns that Ivan's dad worked with Tony's dad to build the first arc reactor. Ivan reveals to Tony that he knows his reactor is killing him, hinting that he knows how to cure Tony. Ivan escapes prison with the help of Justin Hammer, who plans to destroy Tony and his legacy. Rhodey tells Tony that he has to turn the suit in, and then Tony tells Rhodey about his condition and throws what he believes will be his final birthday party. Tony's seen making a fool out of himself, and Rhodey uses the Mark II armor to subdue him. They both fight each other, absolutely destroying his house, and Rhodey takes the suit to the military. Nick Fury meets up with Iron Man, where it's revealed that his assistant, real name Natasha Romanoff, was working under S.H.I.E.L.D. to spy on Stark. Fury gives Tony something that will suppress his condition, which prompts Tony to work with S.H.I.E.L.D. Ivan toys with Hammer suits and turns them into drones. Fury reveals that Howard Stark and Anton created the arc reactor as a stepping stone to revolutionize energy, but when Anton wanted to monetize it, Stark deported him. Fury also tells Tony that Howard was a founding member of S.H.I.E.L.D. and that there is a cure to his problem hiding somewhere in Stark's work. Tony discovers the diorama of the Stark Expo is the key to saving his life, and he uses it to build a better arc reactor. Justin Hammer reveals Ivan's drones at the Stark Expo, as well as the War Machine suit, but Tony comes in time to tell Rhodey that Ivan and Hammer are working together. Ivan uses the drones and the War Machine armor to try and take out Iron Man. Rhodey, who's stuck in the armor, helps Tony survive. Black Widow confronts Hammer and finds out where Ivan's located. Happy and Black Widow infiltrate Hammer Industries where Ivan escapes, but Rhodey regains access to his suit thanks to Black Widow. Tony and Rhodey start putting up Shaq and Kobe numbers on the drones, and they completely wipe out the remaining troops. Ivan shows up in his new armor and the two fight him. Tony and Rhodey do this Dragon Ball Z ass move on Ivan and defeat him, but then he sets all the suits to self-destruct. Tony saves Pepper from the explosion and the expo gets destroyed. Pepper is upset and she resigns, but Tony reconciles with her. Fury tells Tony that he's unsuitable for the Avengers initiative, but wants him as a consultant. Tony agrees on the condition that the senator from earlier has to award Stark and Rhodey medals for their efforts. In the end credit scenes, we get a shot of Agent Coulson driving through New Mexico, where he discovers Thor's hammer. I honestly enjoyed this film a lot more than I thought I would. I think the comedy is great. It might even be better than the first film. Love the new characters that they introduced. It felt like, other than the Avengers, this was the second most important film in terms of putting the audience on the hype train of the MCU, with people like Black Widow, Fury, Rhodey. I also love that we got more depth into Tony's life apart from Iron Man, with the whole entrepreneur mogul side of him from the start. The suits in this film were sick, especially the Mark V and the War Machine armor, and the fight scenes overall were really good. I only have a few takeaways from this film. One, the ending of the last fight was so lame to me. Whiplash was defeated way too easily. Sure, it was a 2v1, but I don't know. It just left a sour taste when he just blows up in the end. I thought it could have been played out a little bit longer. The other thing was that there was a lot of moving parts in the second act of the film, and it was getting a little messy and overwhelming. But I think they added everything together in the end pretty well. Overall, I'll give this a low A. I think this film is very underrated. Next up, we have Thor. Jane Foster and her team go searching for a storm, and they find a big one. While in the storm, they run Thor over. We get a flashback to the year 935 AD, where Asgard and Jotunheim are at war. The two armies battle, and then Odin defeats the king of the Frost Giants, as well as taking their power source. Fast forward, Thor is being crowned the new king of Asgard. The Frost Giants attack Asgard and try to steal the power source, but they get vaporized by the destroyer. Thor throws a hissy fit as he has not been declared king due to the attack, and plots to wage war on Jotunheim. Thor, Loki, and the others ride to Jotunheim. They almost resolve the problem, but then Thor gets rage baited and straight up caves this dude's skull in. The Frost Giants fight with the Asgardians. The Giants release this beast. Thor kills it, and then the team gets surrounded by other troops. Odin comes and bails Thor out, and the war is reignited. Odin banishes Thor to Earth. We get back to the scene from the start of the film, and then he gets electrocuted. He wakes up in a hospital and starts clearing out everyone in his path and gets subdued once more. Thor escapes, and then Jane runs him over again. The townsfolk find the hammer and try to pull it out, but no one has any success. Loki learns that he's adopted and that he's Laufey's son. Odin passes out, Thor starts searching for his hammer, and Agent Coulson appears and confiscates Jane's equipment. Loki's declared king, Thor starts rizzing up Jane, and they attempt to steal the hammer back. We get introduced to Hawkeye, and just as Thor is about to get Mjolnir, he realizes that he can't lift it. Thor gets detained and questioned by Coulson. Loki then appears and tells Thor that Odin is dead and that he's been perma-banned from Asgard. Dr. Selvig bails Thor out. Loki goes to Jotunheim, where it's revealed that Loki was plotting on Thor's downfall this whole time. Loki tells Laufey to kill Odin in exchange for the power source. Thor's pals from earlier set out to rescue Thor. Loki releases the Destroyer, and the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents are notified. Thor learns that Loki lied to him. Loki turns Heimdall into a popsicle, and the Destroyer lands on Earth. A battle commences. The Destroyer starts whooping everyone, and then Thor offers his life, to which the Destroyer straight up pimp slaps Thor 20 feet in the air. Thor's act of selflessness causes him to once again be worthy of Mjolnir, which also restores his powers. Thor defeats the robot and sets his sights for Asgard. Loki brings the Frost Giants into Asgard. Heimdall breaks out of the ice and then brings the group back. Before Laufey kills Odin, Loki kills him to make himself look good, but Thor reveals Loki's plot. Loki attempts to destroy Jotunheim. Loki and Thor scrap it out, and then Thor defeats Loki. Thor prevents Loki from destroying Jotunheim by destroying the Rainbow Bridge, and Odin saves Thor. Then Loki lets go and dies, or so we thought. Thor is back on good terms with Odin, and then he meets up with Heimdall to see if there's a way to get back to Jane. In the end credits, Dr. Selvig meets up with Nick Fury, where we see the Tesseract, as well as Loki controlling Selvig. This film was very weird as it had some really cool details but lacked proper writing and storytelling. I really liked the designs of Asgard. In fact, I think that most of the set designs were pretty cool. It looked really good, especially for an almost 15-year-old movie. I also thought that the costume design was amazing, and I wish Thor used his helmet more in some of the other films. Now, when it comes to the rest of the film, I just feel like they could have went in a way better direction. It started off pretty strong with Thor's banishment, but then it just feels like they made a filler movie to set up the Avengers plot. I feel like Loki was really the only character that really had some depth and motive. They made Thor a self-entitled brat in this film, and I feel like it could have worked out a lot better if maybe Thor was younger, but I don't know. The whole plot felt really insignificant and was just more of a means to connect Thor to Agent Coulson and Loki and the start of the Avengers. Last thing I'll say, let's talk about the camera work, because I swear to God, the director just kept fucking spamming the slanted angle button in this film. Like, bro, you are not cooking with this shot. Overall, I'm gonna give this film a low C. There were some cool concepts. I just feel like they could have made a way more interesting story, especially with how much material they had, not from only the comics, but also Norse mythology. We now arrive at Captain America, the First Avenger. The film begins with a group of explorers finding a plane crash in the Arctic. They cut into a ship and find Cap's shield. We get a flashback to 1942 where Johann Schmidt, the leader of Hydra, finds the Tesseract in an old church. We see a frail Steve Rogers who tries to enlist in the military, but due to his long list of health concerns, gets denied. Steve gets beat up for trying to defend his country's honor in a movie theater and gets saved by Bucky Barnes. Barnes invites Steve to the 1943 Stark Expo, where we see Howard Stark showing off a new flying car prototype. Steve runs off to a recruitment center where a doctor overhears his frustrations of how he can't join the war. The doctor tells him that he's giving him a chance, and he gets approved to go into the military. Although he's very clumsy and weak, he's intelligent and he shows that he has heart. The doctor reveals that he created a super serum to help give Johann strength, but it was imperfect. He reveals that he's chosen Steve for the project because he would put his power to good use. Agent Carter takes Steve to Stark's lab. Steve gets absolutely sauced on Tren, and he turns into the first American super soldier. However, the lab gets blown up by a spy who steals the remaining vial, and the doctor gets smoked. Agent Carter kills the getaway driver with the most diabolical shot of all time, and then Steve chases the guy on foot. Before the spy could get away in his submarine, Steve chases him down and then finds out that he works for Hydra before he unalives himself. Colonel Phillips starts to plan an attack on Hydra, but he leaves Steve out of it. However, the senator makes Steve tour the country as Captain America, as an image that the country can rally behind. The character becomes more and more popular, but Steve still feels that he's not doing his country justice. Steve learns that Bucky's unit is taking heavy casualties against Hydra, so Steve goes into enemy lines on his own. Steve infiltrates a Hydra prison camp and frees the prisoners. Schmidt sees this and sets the camp to blow up. Cap finds Bucky and finds a map of the other Hydra factories. The camp blows up and Cap meets Johann, where we see him take off his mask for the first time before he escapes. Cap and Bucky make it out alive and they get the men to safety. Steve, who's now well respected, creates a team and takes out Hydra bases one by one. The team goes on a mission to capture Red Skull's right-hand man Arnim Zola on a train. However, things go wrong and Bucky falls to his death. Zola gets interrogated and reveals the final Hydra base. Cap reaches the base, beats up some of the Hydra goons, and gets captured. Cap gets saved by his team. Red Skull escapes in a bomber, but Cap reaches it just in time with the help of Peggy and the Colonel. Cap learns that Red Skull has a plan to drop bombs on major cities throughout the US. He straight up dog walks the Hydra agents, and then he gets dragged into one of the bomb plane things. Cap puts this poor guy into a blender, straight up minces bro, and then he takes the plane. Captain America turns into Captain Japan. He kamikazes the bomb into the plane, just uses the ops playbook in the most devious way possible. He sneaks in but gets attacked by the Red Skull. The two duke it out. Cap damages the Tesseract, and Red Skull gets vaporized. The plane is now badly damaged, and Cap realizes that the plane is headed to New York. So he sacrifices himself and crashes the plane into the Arctic, saving millions of lives in the process. The Allies win the war and Cap is celebrated as a hero. Howard Stark finds the Tesseract, and then we see Steve wake up in an old 1940s looking hospital. But he realizes that something's up when he recognizes the radios playing a baseball game that he attended when he was younger. Steve makes a run for it and discovers that he was trapped in ice for almost 70 years. Steve, who is in shock, says that he had a date with Agent Carter. That shit made me sad. But anyways, in the end credit scene, we see Cap boxing. Nick Fury tells Cap that he needs to save the world. This film was really good. I mean, Captain America probably has the most consistent film series in the MCU. I love the 1940s aesthetic with the orange color tones in New York, and I also love how they went above and beyond with not only the setting, but the way people talked, their mannerisms, even the way they throw punches and shoot guns gave off that old film vibe. I loved Cap's arc in this film. He's just a selfish guy who has finally been blessed with the opportunity to save others, and in the end, he makes the ultimate sacrifice and saves his country. The end scene on the bomber was pretty cool, as well as the train mission. I will say, some of the dialogue was super corny, and this is also the first time they were using more hand-to-hand combat with the main character, so it did feel a bit over the top and unrealistic. You can also tell that early on in the MCU, they really went out of their way to tell the audience the entire origin story, which at times can end up hindering the second and third act, but I thought this film was pretty consistent with its overall plot. I'm gonna give this one an A. Really fun to watch, and it connected the last piece of the puzzle we needed to get to the Avengers. And speaking of, we have the Avengers. Loki's alive and is given an army to reclaim the Tesseract. The Tesseract starts acting up, causing S.H.I.E.L.D. to evacuate their base. The Tesseract opens up a portal and Loki appears. Loki takes control of Hawkeye's mind and gets him to shoot Nick Fury. Loki escapes, the base gets destroyed, and then Fury's helicopter is destroyed, but he survives. He tells Agent Hill and Coulson that they're at war, and the Avengers initiative is reopened. Black Widow, who's on a mission to get intel while being interrogated, gets called by Coulson, and then she ends it early by beating the shit out of everyone. She gets tasked with finding the Hulk, who's living undetected in India. He reluctantly agrees after almost causing an incident again. We get the longer version of Cap's post-credit scene where Fury recruits him, and we also see Tony and his new Stark Tower. Coulson interrupts a date with Tony and Pepper and gets him on board as well. Phil starts geeking out over Steve, Loki's warned by the other of the consequences of failure, and the team meets up at the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier. S.H.I.E.L.D. spots Loki in Germany, where he and Hawkeye steal iridium needed to stabilize the Tesseract. Loki starts terrorizing the city, Cap shows up, and they start fighting. Iron Man comes in and helps Cap defeat Loki, and then Thor shows up and kidnaps Loki. Thor and Loki start arguing, Iron Man fights Thor, and then Cap comes in and stops him. Fury tries to interrogate Loki, but he just starts yapping about power and all that stuff. The group gets together to figure out Loki's plan. Steve and Tony start arguing, and Tony thinks that S.H.I.E.L.D. is hiding something, as he hacks the S.H.I.E.L.D. database. Steve goes to investigate, and he learns that S.H.I.E.L.D. is using the Tesseract to create weapons. Fury explains that after Thor's fight in New Mexico, S.H.I.E.L.D. realized that they're outnumbered and needed to be able to defend themselves. The whole team starts arguing, Tony flames the shit out of Steve, and then Hawkeye blows up the helicarrier. Bruce hulks up and chases Black Widow. Steve and Tony start fixing up the engine, and then Thor saves Black Widow from Hulk. Hulk gets shot at and straight up destroys the plane and yeets the pilot. Bro is an absolute menace. We go back to Tony's construction side quest where Loki's goons start attacking Cap, and then Hawkeye shuts down the engine. Loki escapes, Black Widow and Hawkeye start fighting, Loki stabs Agent Coulson, and then Hawkeye gets knocked out. Loki gets boomed by Coulson, Tony fixes the helicarrier, and then Loki gets away. Coulson dies, Hulk falls into a factory butt-ass naked, bro starts free balling the jeans. No undies is crazy work. But anyways, Hawkeye is now out of his trance, Steve and Tony start going back and forth again, but they come to the realization that Loki's gonna use Stark Towers to open a portal. The group go to avenge Coulson's death. They suit up, dare I say, assemble together. My bad, it's been a long editing process for this video. I'm gonna stop myself. Anyways, Tony flies to Stark Towers where we see the Tesseract being used. Loki tries to take over his mind, but fails. He launches Tony out a window, but he suits up just in time. I'm not sure how these people aren't burnt to a crisp right now, but whatever. The portal opens up, the Chitauri army comes through, and they start destroying the city. Thor and Loki fight each other while Tony lures the soldiers towards the Quinjet. Loki destroys the jet and everyone inside crashes into the streets. The Chitauri summons this fucking trilobite looking motherfucker and it starts deploying more troops. Loki stabs Thor. Thor hits him with this WWE ass slam and then Loki gets away. Meanwhile, the three Avengers on the ground start to clear out the streets. Thor joins in as well as the Hulk. Hulk legit starts aura farming in front of Black Widow and hits the craziest straight right on the flying shellfish. Straight up Ngannou levels of power, and then Tony blows it up. We get an Avengers pose mid-battle, and then Loki launches the entire army. Hulk starts beating the absolute piss out of everyone. Thor starts zapping the portal, and then Hawkeye. My god, the no-look shot. Bro thinks he's Curry. I swear, Hawkeye got like a damn arrow for every situation. Like, he has a damn lava arrow, hacker arrow, bomb arrow, green arrow. Cap launches Black Widow onto a speeder. We get this Arkham Knight ass combo from Cap and Iron Man. Hulk and Thor just start booming everything in sight, and then the Doctor wakes up from his trance. Pretty convenient, but anyways, Cap gets launched out of a building, and then the Council tells Fury to launch a nuclear strike on Manhattan, to which he refuses. Hawkeye blows Loki's ship up, and then Hulk absolutely fucks him up, just ragdolls him and leaves him at 1 HP. Doc reveals that Loki's scepter can close the portal. Tony blows up another one of these horseshoe crabs, and then Hawkeye uses his last arrow and uses his massive balls of steel to escape a rooftop explosion. I swear, he had like the most Looney Tunes ass plot armor in this film, but it was dope. Hulk gets switched down by the Chitauri, and Nick Fury tries to stop the Council override, but it's too late. Black Widow starts shutting down the portal while Tony chases the nuke. Tony sends the nuke into the portal, which wipes out the Chitauri space station, neutralizing the entire army. Tony slowly begins to fade away. He closes his eyes, at peace with his decision of saving the world, at peace with his promise to Yinsen many years ago that he would not waste his life. Then, just as the portal was almost closed, Tony makes it back to Earth. Hulk saves Tony, and he wakes up to the realization that they won. They capture Loki, and the media is divided over the Avengers' actions. Thor takes the Tesseract and Loki back to Asgard. Tony starts rebuilding Stark Tower, and then we see that Thanos was the one who helped Loki with the army in the mid-credit scene. And then we also get the Avengers eating shawarma at the end. This film was the first time we had ever seen such a big superhero team up, and it was a major success, as it ended up being the first MCU film to take home $1 billion at the box office. What we got was the result of story arcs from the past 4 years that had finally connected into one big climax. Everything flowed seamlessly, such as callbacks and references to previous films, and it was one of those films where long-term storytelling paid off in the end. Not a single minute was wasted in this film with the way that they told the story. The first thing that I saw was the production quality was a huge leap from Captain America. You could tell, especially with how good the CGI is and the visuals, such as the chaos in New York in the end, as well as the action scenes. The fight choreography was sick, and it was so cool to see when two members interact with each other, just doing straight video game combos on enemies. Each Avenger had their own cool, memorable moments. It's crazy, like this film was so influential, and soon every studio and their mom was creating some type of connected film saga after this. Not to mention, this film single-handedly caused shawarma sales to skyrocket. I think Marvel also realized that they can make longer films and have more time to create better stories, longer action scenes, more detailed character arcs, and they were able to give the fans the proper service that they deserve. This film's going in the S tier, one of the most influential comic book films of all time. Now, before we end, we also have the Marvel one-shots, which were a couple of short films that Marvel put out with the DVD releases to provide more content and help bridge the gap between some of the films. First, we have The Consultant. Set between Hulk and Iron Man 2, Agent Coulson meets up with another man in a diner. Coulson tells the guy that the Council wants to recruit Emil Blonsky for the Avengers Initiative. They devise a plan so that this does not happen by calling Tony Stark to talk to Ross, which was seen in the Hulk end credits. Tony succeeds, and then we see Coulson and the other guy at the diner the next morning. This one was okay. I don't think it really helped give us anything of substance. Just seemed like an extra Coulson scene to help the audience understand how important he is. This one gets a D. Next, we have A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to Thor's Hammer. This one picks off between Iron Man 2 and Thor, where Agent Coulson is headed towards Thor's hammer in New Mexico. Coulson stops at a gas station to get some snacks, but then two armed men come in and rob the place. Coulson gives the robbers his keys, and then he uses his gun as a decoy to distract them. Coulson domes one of them with a pack of flour and then proceeds to disarm and defeat them. He gets his snacks and drives off into the night. I really like this one. It was simple, had a cool little side quest, and it really gives us a look into the day of the life of Agent Coulson. I love the music, the comedic timing, and also the creativity of Coulson when he's in a dangerous situation. This one gets an S. It was a fun little scene that makes Coulson more relatable. Lastly, we have Item 47. Set after the Avengers, we're introduced to a couple, Benny and Claire, and they're arguing about something. We see them put on some ski masks and then they kiss. One of them is equipped with a Chitauri weapon and they start using it to rob banks. They rob a bunch of banks all across the country. We see the guy from the other one shot and he's assigned to track down the couple. Benny gets captured in the room next door, but he warns Claire and she uses the gun to shoot through the wall. The gun gets thrown around and it explodes, destroying all of the stolen money. The agent captures the two and confiscates the weapon, but then he hires the two as SHIELD agents. This one was cool. It was a little longer than the other two, and it was another one of those cool little filler stories to answer some plot holes. I'm gonna give this one a solid B. Now, where does Phase 1 rank overall? I think when you look at the overall product from start to finish, you can see that although there were some misses early on, they were able to recover quickly and they ended up creating the most dominant franchise in film history. This really was one of those things that was never done before and they pulled it off in the end. I'm giving Phase 1 an A. I think there were a few hiccups, but they finished really strong and they were able to set themselves up as the new guys on the block. There you have it. These are my rankings for Phase 1 of the MCU. Comment down below your rankings and what your favorite film was. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I think we're at about 70 subscribers by now, so hopefully we could get to 100 by the end of the year. But yeah, like and subscribe. It really does help me a lot towards my goals, and it gives me motivation to keep making better content based on your guys' feedback. Thank you all, and until next time, goodbye.